Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, Korea's National Assembly grinds to a halt, with the main opposition party launching a sit-in protest over the heavily disputed bill on April's ferry disaster. A mound of pivotal bills aimed at boosting the economy collect dust. As part of President Park Geun-hye's plans to shake up the economy, the government will start offering incentives to banks that support startups and small to mid-sized firms. Plus, Israel and Hamas say they have both accepted a plan put forward by Egypt for a long-term ceasefire in Gaza. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, August 27th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. We begin at the National Assembly, and deadlock there, unfortunately, is nothing new these days, especially when it comes to the special Seoul ferry sinking bill that's at the core of the drama there. But emotions intensified on Tuesday, with opposition lawmakers launching a sit-in protest, boycotting all legislation until the bereaved families get more of a say regarding the probe. Our Connie Kim starts us off.
Opposition lawmakers have occupied the National Assembly building, blocking all parliamentary proceedings to press their demand that the ruling party let the victims' families take part in setting up an investigation into the ferry sinking. Following the ruling party's rejection one day earlier to hold three-way talks with the families, lawmakers of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy earlier on Tuesday demonstrated outside the presidential office of Cheongwade, asking President Park Geun-hye to help resolve the deadlock. They joined dozens of members of bereaved families who have been camped out there since Friday.
We will fight against the ruling Saenuri party and the president until they respond to the requests of the victims' families who want to uncover the real causes of the sinking.
The protesters are calling on the ruling party to make yet another concession after the families rejected bipartisan compromise deals twice on the grounds that their voices were not fully reflected in how a probe into the accident will be carried out. The ruling party lashed back at the opposition party, accusing them of abandoning democratic principles and urging them to immediately return to the National Assembly. The Saenuri party said they will not agree on tripartite negotiations, but will seek to talk to the victims' relatives separately. The months-long political deadlock has suspended all legislative proceedings, including bills aimed at revitalizing the economy and ending corruption, as well as an annual parliamentary audit that was scheduled for this Tuesday. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, all this turmoil at the National Assembly has Korea's Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan on edge. Our Son Jung-in reports on how a number of key bills drafted by Choi and his team aimed at revitalizing the sluggish economy are just sitting there collecting dust.
Standing alongside key policymakers on Tuesday morning, Deputy Prime Minister Choi Kyung-hwan sounded the alarm about the state of the Korean economy and called out lawmakers for their inability to pass a number of key bills aimed at reviving it.
The pulse of our economy is weakening. If those bills related to the livelihoods of the people do not pass during this session, and if we fail to stoke the embers of economic recovery, the economy could go off the tracks and we would face difficulties in turning it around.
While Choi said he understands the importance of the so-called Seoul ferry bill, he also said that 9 economic bills which have been labeled as urgent need to be passed as soon as possible. Choi also pointed out that at least 30 other pending bills need attention as well, all intended to stabilize people's livelihoods. The finance minister asked that lawmakers show leadership moving forward. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, Korea wants to give startups and small and mid-sized firms that have been struggling in recent years better access to funds. They want to do this by easing the government's grip over financial institutions. Chae Yu-sun has the details of a deal which was reached on Tuesday between banks and the government.
As of June of this year, 73% of corporate loans were made to small and mid-sized businesses, a 10 percentage point drop from the end of 2009. The financial sector, specifically those employed by financial institutions, are often reluctant to take a risk with startups and SMEs as they face sanctions if the borrower becomes insolvent. Reporting to President Park Geun-hye at our Economic Advisors meeting Tuesday, the state-run Financial Services Commission said it would lift more than 90% of such sanctions. That means, in the case of insolvency, employees will not be deprived of a promotion or bonuses so long as there are no procedural failures. The financial regulator will instead strengthen sanctions on the institutions. To further encourage financial support for the president's envisioned creative economy, which aims to converge ICT, culture, and other areas, the FSC talked about offering incentives to banks that support innovation and technology-based firms. The government also plans to set up a technology-valued investment fund totaling $295 million that will be used as venture capital and more than double another fund that buys a tech firm's intellectual property or shares to guarantee a return on its investments. President Park urged authorities to ensure enough low-interest loans are made available for businesses whose creativity and innovative technology are appreciated. Many financial insiders welcomed the government's sanction reforms, but there were some concerned about how assessing the bank's innovation for incentives could limit their autonomy and push them toward insolvency. Chae Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Now, it's not all good economic news, though, because there is a rather shaky financial condition among Korean consumers. And almost 1 in every 4 households, in fact, in Korea, is finding it impossible to make ends meet. According to Statistics Korea, the ratio of households with 2 or more people whose spending exceeds their disposable income reached 23% in the second quarter. That's up 0.9 percentage points from the same period last year. The agency says the rise came as the growth of disposable income failed to catch up with consumption spending. And Korean households in general may need some help as well as they sink deeper and deeper into debt. Data by the Bank of Korea shows credit purchases and loans by households hit a fresh high in the second quarter, totaling just over $1 trillion. The amount of household credit increased by 6% on year, surpassing the growth of nominal GDP. Korea's household debt has risen for 5 straight quarters now. This means a heavier burden when paying off mortgage loans, which in turn could further slow consumption.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, Japan will use its government budget to promote the verification result of its landmark apology to the victims of its wartime system sex slavery. According to Japan's national broadcaster NHK, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said on Tuesday that Tokyo will spend part of its budget to advertise the Kono statement, both at home and abroad, following a request by the government. Now, the Kono statement was Tokyo's acknowledgement in 1993 of the Japanese military's involvement in forcing tens of thousands of women, including a great many Koreans, into sexual servitude before and during World War II. Critics say Japan's review of the Kono statement earlier this year suggested the Abe administration wanted to make it look as though that admittance was based on shaky evidence and to also damage the credibility of the apology and lessen its international reputation. North Korea is reportedly developing a ballistic missile submarine that, if confirmed to be true, would significantly raise the threat posed by the nuclear-armed communist state. A privately owned US-based media outlet called Washington Free Beacon reported on Tuesday that US defense intelligence agencies recently detected a previously unseen missile launch tube on a North Korean submarine. North Korea is also believed to have obtained submarine-launched ballistic missiles from Russia. If confirmed, this development would mean North Korea now has the capability to target Anchorage in Alaska, as well as US forces on Okinawa, the Philippines and Guam from Asian waters. A Pentagon spokesman has declined to comment on the report. Now, joint military drills between South Korea and the United States have left inter-Korean relations on the whole at quite a low ebb. But there is one area in which the two Koreas are showing signs of some cooperation. It's the Asian Games, and they're set to take place in South Korea's port city of Incheon from next month. Well, North Korea has said that it would send 273-member delegation to this very prestigious sporting event. And on Tuesday, the two Koreas started discussing the related details. South Korea's Unification Ministry says it sent a 2-page letter to North Korea through the truce village of Panmunjom. A ministry official said the letter did not contain a direct offer to provide financial support for the North Korean athletes and the delegation as a whole, which North Korea wants, but added that Seoul will give full support in making sure the athletes don't experience any inconveniences during their time here. Now, birth rates have been falling in nearly every developed country in the world for years now, but even against this backdrop, Korea stands out, and not in a good way, and the problem is actually worsening by the year. If this trend continues, in fact, officials say Korea's so-called super low birth rate will inevitably impact the labour force and severely limit room for economic growth. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
It's becoming harder to hear the crying of newborns in Korea. The nation's birth rate has been on a steady decline over the past 40 years. Currently, it has the lowest birth rate among the 34 OECD member countries. Last year, the number of newborns stood at 436,500, a near 10% decrease from 2012. This means about 8.6 babies were born among a population of 1,000, the lowest since the year 1970, when the government first began recording population data. The age of pregnant mothers, meanwhile, is getting higher, which is one of the main contributing factors for the country's low birth numbers. Last year, the average age of mothers who gave birth was 31.8 years old, 0.2 year older than the previous year. 1 in 5 of them were aged 35 or older. The Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs says the low birth rate trend will affect the labor force in the long run. The number of able workers between the ages of 15 to 64 is estimated to stand at 37.2 million in 2016 and is expected to steadily decrease to less than 9.5 million people by the year 2100.
The country's labor productivity will greatly fall with the growing rise of the aging labor population, as there are less newcomers joining the workforce.
The researcher emphasized the need to come up with comprehensive measures to ease the burdens families face when raising children, particularly policies that would help parents balance work and family life. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, in Korea's corporate culture, employees take orders and they generally refrain from questioning their seniors or expressing bold new ideas, at least if they want to keep their jobs. But an increasing number of local IT companies are breaking the status quo in an effort to survive in the global marketplace. Our Yulian has this report.
Korean IT companies are creating a more casual work environment to promote creativity. Daum Communications, which is set to merge with Korea's largest messenger application company, Kakao Corporation, says it will have its 1,600 workers refer to each other with English names by October. It's intended to eliminate the hierarchy that's standard in Korean culture, where employees are socially obligated to address each other by their position and seniority instead of by their first names like in the West. Daum believes the change will allow young staffers to more freely express themselves and enhance communication and cooperation in the process. Naver Corporation took a step in the same direction recently when it said that its employees will stop referring to each other by their titles to create a less formal work environment. Could the seemingly minor changes bring about real changes to Korea's innovation potential? A recent innovation index ranked Korea 16th out of 77 countries, higher than Japan or China. But when it came to the so-called tolerance index, which measures how much a society tolerates different values and thoughts, Korea was ranked near the bottom at 62.
If we look at our Confucianist culture, we were taught that there is a right answer to everything. We're never taught to look for new answers. To foster creativity, we need to learn that there isn't just one correct answer to everything, and understand there could be multiple answers.
With Korea's rigid and hierarchical corporate culture being blamed for stifling creativity, the IT companies are trying to break it down, one English name at a time. Yurian, Arirang News.
Now, staying with English names and the global tech market, the US online retail giant Amazon has bought Twitch, a video game streaming service, in a deal worth nearly $1 billion. Analysts say it's part of Amazon's plan to expand its media empire by capitalizing on the booming esports market. Amazon announced on Tuesday it would buy Twitch for $970 million in cash, marking one of the biggest acquisitions for the e-commerce company. The takeover came as a shock to many in the tech industry, as Google had been reportedly holding talks with Twitch early this year for a possible buyout. Since launching back in 2011, Twitch has become the most popular gaming network with more than 55 million unique viewers last month. In a statement, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos said broadcasting and watching gameplay had transformed into a global phenomenon.
You play Jack Joyce fighting.
Okay, now it's time for the international headlines we're following on this Wednesday morning here in Korea. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by for us, as always, at the News Center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. A new ceasefire has been reached between Israel and Palestine, and this time it doesn't have an expiration date. Palestinians poured into the streets and celebrated as the truce appeared to end 7 weeks of heavy fighting that has killed more than 2,200 people that left tens of thousands others homeless, mostly in Gaza. Egypt, which brokered the deal, said the contents of the ceasefire included an easing of the Gaza blockade, opening border crossings for aid and reconstruction materials to pass through, and extending the fishing limit to 6 nautical miles from 3 nautical miles. Now, both sides have agreed to return to Cairo for more talks to address long-term issues, though it is yet unclear when that will be. Sources say the United States has begun reconnaissance flights over Syria following President Barack Obama's green light on Tuesday. This as the White House is mulling over extending airstrikes to Syria after seeing considerable success in Iraq in holding back Islamic State militants warring for territory against Kurdish Peshmerga forces. Now, the surveillance flights are being seen as a mission to obtain additional information, as Pentagon officials draft potential options for the president, which includes airstrikes. Syria, though, has warned Washington not to extend its airstrikes over its airspace if it will be unilateral in nature, underlining that they must be planned in tandem with Damascus. A United Nations helicopter has been shot down in rural South Sudan, killing 3 Russian citizens on board while 1 survived. The cargo chopper crashed near a hotly contested region between government and rebel fighters who have been engaged in fighting since December. A spokesman for a state governor said a rebel commander had warned the UN not to fly over that territory last week. The United Nations said it is investigating the crash. And Korea's foreign ministry has installed a special travel warning to the northern Equator province of the Democratic Republic of Congo, following its announcement that it has, following Congo's announcement that it has observed Ebola deaths. Now, the warning would be good for 1 week and automatically extended until a further cancellation notice. And meanwhile, in England, the first Briton to contract Ebola in decades, William Pooley is his name. He has received the experimental drug ZMapp, according to reports. The volunteer nurse had become infected while working with patients in Sierra Leone.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the South Korean Little League World Series team as they received a congratulatory message from President Park Geun-hye herself. Now, the South Korean Little League team, who said they wanted to meet President Park Geun-hye after their Little League World Series victory, got a personal message from the president. Now, she stated that the entire nation is proud of their feat and that their victory meant that much more since it was their first in 29 years. Now, she added that she hopes to see the team grow and continue their success. Meanwhile, staying in baseball, some bad news for Chu Shin-soo of the Texas Rangers as his season came to an end after his team decided to perform surgery on his elbow. The South Korean slugger, who signed a 7-year, $130 million deal during the past offseason, will get surgery on his left elbow in 2 weeks. The bone spur, which has been bothering him throughout the season, was known by the team during spring training as the team decided on the surgery, with the team nowhere near playoff contention. Meanwhile, he's set to rehab for 8 weeks after the surgery. Meanwhile, more injury news for another big-name star, this time in the UFC, where the Korean zombie Chung Chang-sung will miss his fight slated for October after injuring his shoulder during training. Now, the 27-year-old fighter, who's currently ranked 6th in the featherweight class, injured the same shoulder he has been rehabbing since his title fight against Jose Aldo 1 year ago. His manager stated that the rehab will take about a month as he plans to finally return to the UFC in December. And now finishing things off with some Tuesday night KBO action, we had the 2 Seoul games rain out last night as the Kia Tigers and the Nexen Heroes were rained out, as well as the Tucson Bears and the LG Twins. But the Samsung Lions were able to cruise past the Lotte Giants 10-7. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Hanwha Eagles take on the NC Dinos. And of course, going into the game here, first inning, Eric Thames with an RBI double to left field scores Park Min-woo, and the NC Dinos take the lead 1-0. By the bottom of the inning, with men on second, Song Kwang-min an RBI single to right, and we're tied 1-1. Bottom of the fourth, 2 men on, Song Kwang-min once again, this one a 2-run single to left, and the Hanwha Eagles take the lead 3-1. Ninth inning, NC down 3-2 with the bases loaded and 2 outs, but Lee Sang-ho at bat, and here it goes. He strikes out, looking ball game over. The Hanwha Eagles win this one 3-2. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Well, sporadic showers are falling in regions down south at the moment, but later on, 10 to 60 millimeters of more rain is in store for Jeollado province and Jeju Island during the day. But the rest of the country could see light drizzles in the day. But most of the time, mix of sun and clouds should dominate across much of the country, and temperatures should be similar to a tad warmer than yesterday. So let's take a closer look at those temperatures. The afternoon high in the capital will rise to 30, while Daegu and Gwangju will make it to 28, and Busan will rise to 26 this afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 26 and 28 respectively, and Dokdo should see highs of 22 later in the day. Well, if you're in the southern provinces, that you might want to have an umbrella handy on your way out, but for people in the upper regions, including here in Seoul, you won't need to. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for now. Thanks ever so much for watching the program. Korea Today is coming up in about half an hour's time, and I'll be back at 10 a.m. Korea time with another newscast. Until then, goodbye.